what is going on? We are here with our youth podcast. We're super excited. I have one of my favorite leaders. He's new, but he's awesome, and I love him. Jeffrey Grimes, say what's up.
Thank you. Hello.
You're welcome. I love you so much. I'm just going to shout you out because you're doing so much. Sometimes I feel like I'm overworking you, but you haven't told me that yet, so I'm going to keep working on you. But he's here. I invited him to be on the podcast. This is his first time. Have you ever done a podcast before?
I have not.
You have not? First time ever?
First time.
Okay. All right. I love it. You nervous? Excited? What are you feeling?
I'm a little in between.
In between.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a middle emotion that I love to hear. So. But I'm excited to have Jeffrey on. We're going to be, in this month, we've been talking about a new series that we started about the wilderness, how God works in the wilderness. But before we jump into that, I'm just going to ask you what I asked the other guys. What is your most embarrassing story that you can think of? Like, I know you've had some life. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 30.
You're 30. Okay, so you're not much older than me.
Yeah.
We're like 5 years apart.
Yeah.
But I think what would be your most embarrassing moment that you've maybe ever experienced in high school, life, work? Take your time to think about it. I know it's hard to think about an embarrassing moment, but I'll tell you the one I told him.
Okay.
This is gonna come out later. It's weird because this is the first episode, and it's so weird to film.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I told an embarrassing story about me with I used to raise cattle. You know, you ever?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not a farm guy, if you've ever noticed.
Yeah.
But when I was like 12, I thought I would try it. And I almost got ran over by one, so.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was not fun. It was very embarrassing. I quit. I was like 2 days in, quit after that, never did it again. So, but I ran away, barely clipped my leg. It was really embarrassing to people that were watching. They laughed at me.
Yeah.
I was scared out of my mind though. I still feel the emotions right now. I feel like I'm scared right now. It's about to happen again. It just came back to me. So that's my embarrassing moment that I told the earlier one. But what do you got? What's
the one that's on the top of my head is, because I know, and I'm not trying to make this about religious for a second.
No, dude.
But Michael was talking about peer pressure in terms of how y'all had a podcast about it.
Yep.
And in that process, the immediate most embarrassing moment that I can think of is like guilt and shame because one of my it was like in first grade.
Yeah.
We were in lunch line, like we're getting all the baskets to pick up like milk on our lunch, and my friend was like, "Wouldn't it be cool if you threw that milk against the wall?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and I threw it.
Yeah.
And then my first grade teacher, shout out Ms. Forsberg, she came over and she's like, "Why would you do this?" I said, "I don't know. I just said yes." So I still think about that day. I'm like, why did I do that?
That's kind of embarrassing. It's one of those things in the moment you thought was cool, but then you get outside and you're like, why did I do that? That also, I've told it. Have you ever heard the story of me saying I pantsed the kid in junior high?
Yes.
You heard that story? They all know that story. I don't really say it again, but that's one of those moments. I look back and I'm just like, why would I do that? In the moment it was great, but
and then I had to watch the lady clean it up, which made me feel worse. She didn't make me feel it up, clean it up, and I'm like,
that's actually a worse punishment.
It is.
I've never known that you think you clean it up.
Yeah.
It's actually worse to watch somebody else clean it up.
Yes. Yep.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's me. That's me.
Elementary stuff. I used to steal candy in elementary school. Did you know that?
Yeah. No, I didn't.
My dad used to work at a school, the school that I went to, PCS, shout out Peter Christian, and basically everybody else in the classroom would go wait outside for their parents to pick them up in the car line. I would go to my dad's office.
Okay.
So I waited until everybody left the classroom. I was like, bye, acting like I'm the cool kid, saying bye to everybody. Yeah. And then I'd go back into the classroom. My teacher had a big bowl of candy, and I would just take handfuls and put it in my pocket, and then I would just leave. One day I got caught. My dad, you could always tell my dad was coming when his keys were jingling.
Yep.
And so I heard his keys jingling this one time.
Yeah.
I booked it and hid under one of the tables. He ended up coming into the classroom. He caught me and he's like, "What are you doing?" I think I ended up telling them, and then I had to go and apologize to the teacher, and I had to go to Walmart and buy bunches of candy that I stole and replace everything that I took. That was an embarrassing moment.
Yeah.
A lot of stupid things we did in high
school. We sure did.
But anyway, that's watching me clean it up. I will never get past it. I'm gonna make my kids do that.
Yeah.
You watch me clean this up right now because I want you to feel that. That's intense. Anyway, so cool. But like I said, we are in a new series. Just talking about the wilderness, right? And the series has been amazing. We just started it this past week. Just talking about the Israelites, fleeing Egypt, going into the wilderness for 40 years. And so today's topic is kind of just going to be this idea of the wilderness is a workshop for God. Okay. And I picked that topic because I believe in the wilderness, God is always working. Yeah. But the thing is, you don't see it while you're in it. And so let's just kind of, I'm just going to open the floor for you. Whatever you got, I know you got some wisdom. I've heard it, I've experienced it. But just along that idea, the wilderness is a workshop for God. What speaks out to you right away in that?
So the first thing I think about is kind of who is leading us in that wilderness. And we can kind of go into like Matthew in terms of where Jesus baptized. Like he didn't have to be baptized, but he baptized us to kind of communicate with us and identify with us as man. So when he did that, the next chapter, it immediately goes into the Holy Spirit led Jesus to the wilderness, right? Led him to the desert, to where he would be tested. So the first thing when I think about the wilderness in this process is I need to make sure that whether I know I'm in a desert season or a dry season, I need to make sure I know who's leading me.
For sure.
And in that process, I think it'd be really easy to be deceived in terms of who is, like what I'm consuming, who I'm listening to, the people I surround myself with. But Jesus actually gave us different things that we should kind of use and apply, or can apply in our daily life, and especially in times when we're in a season of isolation or loneliness or the wilderness, as you're saying. So I think the first thing I'm thinking about is being led by the Spirit.
For sure, yeah. There was a devotion that we did today, or I did today, and it talked kind of about this idea is to remember when you're being tested, when you're in the wilderness, when you're going through stuff, when you're going through life, it said to remember what you were taught. And it gave this analogy of a teacher when you're taking a test, right? There's a teacher in the room giving you the test, and I think that analogy really just spoke out to me because it's like God is giving us maybe a test, but before that test, he taught us everything we needed to know, right? And so it said in this devotion, remember what you were taught. And I think that's kind of going along with what you're saying is like having the right people, having the right tools, but also remembering what kind of happened in your life beforehand, before maybe that person died, before that addiction, before that struggle, whatever it is, remember what you were taught, because then that's going to help you once you're in the wilderness. And that's the biggest thing I thought about with this whole idea of being in the wilderness season, because that's also what Jesus, when you just brought that up, it made me think when he was baptized, he was learning. There's the one story about Jesus when he was like 12 years old in the temple learning, right? Only story we have of Jesus when he was young. But then we see him getting baptized, and then now he's in the wilderness and he's remembering everything he was taught up until that moment. What do you think about that?
I love that, because I think in this process, like, it's important for us to not only remember like the different, like of course you can apply scripture, you can apply different things for your life, but also you can remember what God did before this moment in time. So I think remembering what you've learned in the past, but also remembering how God's faithfulness brought you through. Even if like you weren't a Christian yet, maybe if in this process like you went through trials, you went through grief and loss, maybe you made mistakes, maybe you did things that you regret doing, God was still working in you, he was still faithful to you in that process. So remembering not just what you can apply, but also what God has already done in your life.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is just God is always working, but it's sometimes we don't feel like it, right? And so for you, I don't know, give us some of you don't give me your whole story, but based on this question, like, was there ever a moment in your life where you were just like, man, I don't see God. I don't experience him right now. Is he even there? Did you ever have those questionable moments? You got anything off the top of your head that you can think of for those?
I really think of, I grew up in a Catholic church and went to a Catholic school, kindergarten to 8th grade. And kindergarten, I would say up until like 5th grade was pretty good. It wasn't really like, we had mass on Wednesdays and those type of things, but that was fine. And then kind of junior high, like 6th through 8th grade, 5th through 8th grade, that was a really challenging part of my life. Dealt with a lot of isolation in terms of my parents lived in 2 separate homes in terms of growing up in a divorce. And in that process, I would travel 30 minutes from my hometown just to go to my dad's house. So in that process, we also had like 13, 14 students in my class, graduating class. So it was a very tight-knit.
That's small, That is small.
So when I think about that time in my life, I was an isolated, angry, depressed kid. hard for me to connect to people. Sport was my really like big outlet.
Yeah.
In terms of just playing basketball, soccer, like running, and things of that nature. And that was a good source for me. But in terms of your question about God, like, it was hard for me to identify where God was, who God was, because I also didn't really have people who I was listening to, people who I was like surrounding myself with, to kind of lift me up in the goodness of God.
For sure, yeah.
Because nothing wrong with the Catholic Church. Like my mom, she took me every Sunday. Shout out Mom. Like she taught me so much in terms of accountability, repetition, the process of to this day she's like my prayer warrior in terms of just loving on me and praying for me in those regards. But I just experienced the Catholic Church in a different way, I think, than my mom, because it was a lot of it just felt very kind of punishing, and almost in a way of like, if you don't do these things, God is very angry with you.
Right.
These are the things that you need to do in order to atone for that.
Right.
And in that process, and I don't think it was any individual, like one person's fault. I think it's more of like a system lens. I just grew up in an environment where I felt like God was always mad at me. He was disappointed. He frankly, like, how could he love me if I'm doing these different things wrong? So when I kind of grew up in that kind of mindset, God kind of took me on a different route to learn of his love, because at the beginning it was like, why would God want anything to do with me?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that was the time for me in your life, junior high, right? And that's the same, I think, with me was junior high, high school, because in junior high I had just moved states, moved from Illinois to Arizona, and as a junior high kid, you're trying to figure out, one, who you are, but then on top of it, to add to that, I'm now moving where I know who I am to a completely strange place where I have no idea who I am. You know, and I think in junior high, high school, beginning of high school, even throughout all of high school, you're still trying to figure it out. And I think just to share kind of where you were at, different religion, like I've grown up Christian, so I've never had to experience really a different religion. I have family who are Catholic. My dad was raised Catholic. My mom was raised Christian. My grandparents were Christian. I'm Christian. But to experience different things just in life, right? You experienced the same thing even though you're a Catholic. Corey gave his story, and he experienced the same thing even though he wasn't a Christian or believed in any religion until he was 18. You know what I mean? And so we all experience and go through different things, but we're all connected together as one, right? And so one of the things I want to talk about from my perspective was when I was in junior high, I never realized like I was a depressed kid. Like I never really, it's funny how you don't realize something until you're out of it.
Yes.
I don't know if you ever realized that. But when I was in junior high school, I never realized that I was actually depressed. And I laugh at it now because I was the kid who used to ride a penny board. Remember those little skateboards? People would always make fun of me because you're like, ride a longboard, they're better. I was like, I like a penny board, it's fun. Anyway, I rode a penny board, and I would have my phone or my iPod at the time, and I would listen to like sad music. And back then I thought it was normal. I was like, this is just, I like this music, it's not like riding my penny board, it's normal. But every time I did that, I had a good life, I had a good upbringing, but I was just in this season where I was just trying to figure it out. I had bad friend groups at the time. I had, we were living in a place where I saw a lot of difficulties. Maybe you didn't know this, we lived at a children's home where kids were brought in. They had families, but they were brought in because their families couldn't take care of them maybe. And so basically they were, either their parents were in jail, grandparents were in jail, drug abuse, all that stuff. So this really, I don't want to say bad kids, but these kids in terrible situations would come in, and I was friends with them. And so I was experiencing their life from a whole different perspective. And so walking through school, it just transformed me and did something different. And I think I just went through a season where I was just like trying to figure out what I wanted. And I think for me, that was a wilderness season. For me, that was like, man, where am I? Who am I? And thank God I had, and you said you had your mom, prayer warrior. I always had my parents, beautiful. But there was a season too with my parents where I felt like they had other kids to take care of. I didn't realize that until I was removed. And I joke with them now. They don't think it's funny, but I think it's funny. It's probably something I need to work on. I don't know. Therapy, we'll figure it out. But I felt like they were raising other kids and I wasn't being raised.
Yeah.
That's the reality of what I think I went through. And what happened is I had to just go through it myself.
Yeah.
Like I had to figure it out. But thank God I had one of my parents, and two, I also had this guy named Adam. I'll shout him out. He still lives in Arizona, still a great guy. He was a policeman, firefighter, wilderness guy, and he took me under his wing, great Christian man. And he would tell me about Jesus, which I already knew about Jesus, but he would teach me about Jesus, and we would work out together, and he would teach me these life principles that still to this day I remember.
Yeah.
But it's always amazing, and I want to talk about this. You said your mom, but I want to ask you this question. In your life during that season, did you have anybody else in your life, man, that really was just there for you? Not in maybe a Christian sense or a Catholic sense, but maybe it is, I don't know.
Yeah.
But who were those people in your life that, man, just really pushed you in that moment?
Yeah, so I can think of one off the top of my head. Rod Michaels was my 7th and 8th grade basketball coach.
Gotcha.
He was just always there for me. Whether I'm having a rough day, whether we have frustrations on the court with teammates, and it's like, hey, we gotta talk this through. He was just always a presence that, looking back on, I can tell and see how God kind of placed him in my life.
Yeah.
For a purpose, in terms of he just provided comfort and structure, provided kind of like both an authority figure, but also like a godly man, a father. Like those were different kind of just characteristics that I think really helped me in terms of grow and really helped me propel into high school. And I also think of my 7th grade teacher, Mr. French. He was always just asking me how I was doing in the process of, he knew a little bit about my background and my situation too. And I think that those two really helped me kind of get to high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I ask you that because I just feel like sometimes when we're in seasons like that, we're divorced, we're walking through whatever it is with our families or our parents or siblings or loved ones, it's easy to just tune everything out, right? And just not care, right? And you could have done that. You could have your teacher could have said, hey, how are you doing today? And you'd be like, don't talk to me. And you could have just moved on. But I asked that because I think about the people that were in my life, which it wasn't just my parents and Adam, but I had teachers that were in my life. I had people that just really cared. I had friends that cared, And I say that and I ask that because I think it's so important to see those things when you're little. Because it's like what you said, you removed yourself. When you removed yourself and you got older, you realized, man, God placed that basketball coach in my life. And I think in that moment, you probably didn't see that. You're probably like, this is my basketball coach. This is the guy who's teaching me how to play basketball. I'm probably going to make it to the NBA one day. That's probably what you're thinking. And we don't see that in the moment. But I want to use that as a tool for whoever's watching or listening to who's in your life. Because in the wilderness, in the dark seasons, in the stuff that you're going through, and the things that you're walking through, there's somebody that God is trying to put into your life to teach you. And I think for me, it's our leaders, it's you. I'm sure you're mentoring some students. You got some guys that I love seeing the relationship you've built with guys. Either it's playing basketball on Sundays, at youth on Wednesdays, at youth on Sundays, just watching that. And I think sometimes students don't see that. But talk about, you kind of did, but what kind of impact did that have for you?
It was huge.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of more people as you were talking, like different parents who would take us to games and traveling, and those people speak life into you. And I also, when you're saying that, I think it's really important of like what you went through in terms of suffering, of like, different relationships of like, even with parents, great, you talk about the process of them helping you, and also in terms of like what you needed and what you missed. And I had that with my own relationships with parents and different things that I needed or wanted.
Right.
I'm not so sure that God even wanted that for us, right? But He will use it for His good in the future.
For
and
sure.
The reason why I'm saying that is because I think I'm a therapist. I am today because of God used the difficult experiences for me to be able to sit across from someone and absorb what it is that they're walking through. Be able to sit with them, be compassionate, be empathic. Whether it's with youth, whether it's with my clients, like I can sit from someone and across from someone and be with them. And I think it's really due to my upbringing, what I experienced.
Yeah.
And I look at that as a blessing. I don't look at that as punishment.
For sure.
And I think there's a big difference too between punishment and discipline.
Yeah.
So God might be disciplining you in terms of building you up and giving you skills and helping you kind of callous your mind in certain things,
right.
To help you in like what you can do for His purpose. And sometimes we don't see that. So your question kind of prompted me to know that.
No, go for it. Keep going. This is great. Go.
Yeah. So I think in that process, God doesn't. He doesn't mind your anger. He doesn't mind your questions. He doesn't mind what it is of like, what is His purpose for?
Yeah.
I think our humanness comes into that, in that we want to know the answer right now.
For sure.
Like we want to figure out like what is this and why is it happening, and God might just be saying not yet. Because if I was able to hear, like this is going to be your life, and these are some of the things that you're going to go through that I don't want you to go through them. I love you, and I know it's going to be hard for you, and yet here's how you're going to be able to help people in the future. I don't know if I would have said yes to that.
Right. Yeah.
But I think in that process, identifying that God is faithful, He loves you, He has a plan for you, His purpose for you, and also sometimes we're mixed in a world that has free will and has people who don't identify with Jesus, who don't have that in their hearts, which you can also mix in with that too, which can cause a lot of problems and difficulty in that way. So I think God is always working, and like you said, in terms of putting that foundational pieces and the people around you to help you, I identify with that a lot.
That's amazing. I want to ask you this question.
Yeah.
You said you were raised Catholic. How did you become Christian? I want to know that, and I'm sure they probably asked the same thing. What was that like for you?
So I had a pretty big, I would say, separation from the Catholic Church, in that, you can show up to church, right? You can show up and you can be there. Your body can be there, but how much are you actually applying and listening and doing? And I would say from high school up until sophomore, junior years of college, when I would attend Mass with Mom, I was just a body.
Yeah, you're just there.
Yep, I was just there. And in that process, I think I had a friend who took me to church. Friends, youth, take your friends to church. And it was like for the de-churched. Like it was in Decatur, Illinois. It's called Renaissance. And in that process, they started out as like a Bible study of like 7 or 8 members, and it built up to like what it is today. And in that process, like they had Sunday night services. That was actually their first service, because they wanted to get people who were off of work and in the process of just having a different time. And I think that experience of that first kind of new environment for me, where I was far from Jesus. I was kind of detached from what I grew up kind of listening to in terms of the Catholic Church. And also seeds were already planted. Something that I didn't say is when I was with my dad and stepmom, they actually took me to a Christian church. I got to spend, I would say, once a month kind of attending that. And I always really liked it. They had youth, and I remember a couple trips that I was able to go on in that process. And I think looking back on it, the seeds planted in that regard helped me kind of take that next plunge or step. Of like that friend asking me to go to church. Who knows, maybe I would have said no if I didn't have that other experience. So I think that's that other thing too, of like God knew what He was doing. The friend just asked, he was led, and in that process, kind of the rest was history in terms of having that great experience, going for 2 years, and having to shift into going to another place.
That's amazing. And see, it's like what you said, it just showed that God was always working, right? And that's why I asked you, because I wanted to know kind of how you got to where you are today and here. And it does just show, to also go back to what you were talking about, is yes, things might happen to us, and does God really want them to happen to us? Probably not, but our choices got us there. But ultimately, God knows everything, right? God knows the choice I'm going to make tomorrow that's going to cause something maybe to happen. God knows everything. And the beauty of that is to remind us that if God knows everything, then God knows the outcome. And it says in Scripture, God has the best plan for us. He's got a purpose for us, right? And so if He knows everything, He's got a plan for us, He has a purpose for us. That means that when we're in that season, whether it's in junior high, whether it's in high school, we can be reminded of and be encouraged that this is just for a season.
Yeah.
Just for a moment. It's not going to last forever. We're going to eventually get to the other side of it. We're eventually going to get through it. And so one last thing, what is one thing that maybe when you were in junior high school that you wish somebody would have told you before we close out? Is there any bit of encouragement that you can just think of that, man, I wish somebody would have said this to me when I was in junior high school?
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is when you talk to God, talk to Jesus, prayer can look like whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a specific like Holy Father, like none of that stuff. Like you can incorporate that, sure.
Yeah.
But it can look like whatever you want it to look like, as long as it's from your heart and it's devoted to Him.
Yeah.
And I think for me, as a perfectionist in the process of like trying to remove some of that flesh and like I'll talk about this on Sunday, of like identify really with Jacob in Genesis of like the process of I really just need to remove some of that self-reliance.
Yeah.
And in prayer, like it can be whatever it is that you want.
That's beautiful.
And He will love it.
Yeah.
And if you can remove some of that own like worry, anxiety, like just perfectionist stuff, and just be in His presence, let it out. That's what I would encourage you to use. Yeah.
And will encourage me. So
awesome.
But no, thank you for being here. I appreciate you.
Thank
coming
you.
in while you're working. You're here. I love it. I'm definitely having him back. So
awesome.
But thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Jeffrey, for being here. I appreciate you. But we'll see y'all next time.
Bye.